Well, thanks very much for joining us. It's been a very successful meeting of the Pacific Island Forum, and it's been a great pleasure and an honour to represent Australia here. We are family when it comes to the Pacific, and there was a good spirit of cooperation and dialogue, speaking about our common interests. Australia's new position on climate change was particularly well received, and that's reflected in the communiqué. It was also reflected in the comments that were made in every single one of the person-to-person dialogue I had with Prime Ministers and other leaders from our Pacific Island neighbours. I do want to congratulate Frank Bainimarama for his hosting and chairing of the PIF. It was a very successful effort. The PIF has not met in person for 3 years because of COVID, and there was a lot to do. There were divisions earlier this year, but the fact that 17 of the 18 nations have signed the Suva Declaration for the new structure of the Pacific Island Forum, which has brought countries together, is very positive indeed. And this afternoon, the leader of Kiribati spoke to Prime Minister Bainimarama and indicated to him that they wanted to have dialogue, and of course the door is open for Kiribati to rejoin the Pacific Island Forum and once again bring the family back together. It was a good meeting where we discussed issues of national security and security here in the Pacific, where we talked about climate change, where we talked about the range of challenges which are there, the economy going forward and how we continue to have growth in these economies and a successful region. There is a real sense of regional cooperation here. And this afternoon as well, we adopted the plan to 2050, once again looking for the long term rather than just short-term interests, and that's to a great credit of the Pacific Island Forum leaders who've done a lot of work in the lead up to this conference, and I think it marks a real success going forward. Happy to take questions.
Prime Minister.
How did the leaders receive Australia's pledge to co-host COP with them? Did one nation express more interest than another, and did it come with conditions attached?
Well, they all expressed support for the bid, and you'll see that reflected in the communiqué. And every nation expressed support. They were very enthusiastic about the idea, because what it will do is to provide a focus on the very real threat that climate change has to our Pacific Island neighbours. For countries like Tuvalu and Kiribati, it's a threat to their very existence. And indeed, in the communiqué, you'll see that threat mentioned very directly. They were very supportive, and indeed, in the communiqué, it is reflected the support of every single one of the island nations' support for our bid for a conference of the parties on climate change to be held with Australia and the Pacific. Of course, the conference itself, the lead up to the COP, consists of a large meeting of the world's leaders, but it also consists of a range of lead-up forums and activities in the year leading up to it. And that's something in which I asked the Pacific Island leaders to think about what contribution they could make, how they could be involved and engaged. And they were very, very interested in doing that. There's time, of course. The decision won't be made until the COP27, which is being held at Sharm el-Sheikh later this year in Egypt. And that will make a decision about where the future conference is in 2024.